Okay, so let's start. Fine. Okay, so uh, fine. We have seen RMI part. Okay, but that's about RMI. When we say RMI, it is about method invocation, which becomes very specific about a solution which is only using purely on based on Java technology. Fine. Okay, so you may be having, but most commonly, you will have the other technologies also, and you would like to have interaction between all kinds of things. Okay, another thing, what is most common, fine, even the interfacing part, the most common interfacing which is prevalent today is nothing but your browser. For anything, oh, you always want to use one single client, and that's going to be your browser. So everything should be web based. Fine. And when we say web based, it requires your interaction again. This is network based. So what is the protocol being used most commonly here? The most common protocol for the web today is HTTP.
So instead of HTTP, we can completely rely on RMI. Is it true or not?
Okay, you can rely on RMI.
100% for entire application.
Okay, but you will face difficulties in terms of firewalls. Okay, fine. RMI uses port 1099. Okay, and that normally firewalls would be preventing it. Firewalls only keep one port open, and that's for the HTTP only. And that's one reason everyone wants to shift to HTTP. Okay,
So
fine.
if we are maintaining our private servers,
Yeah, there are mechanisms also which you can find where using the HTTP port also on top of HTTP also RMI could also be managed.
so to make a robust application, should we use HTTP or RMI for safety, security, and all?
We can use, I think, it will all depend like how you have designed the things. Yeah.
I am trying to judge the significance of RMI. Then.
Huh.
If it is existing,
Yeah.
it has some value.
Yes.
And if people are using HTTP in the most cases, so RMI is
Web services is what is the other alternative to RMI. It's a web services. The alternative to RMI is web services. Okay. Fine. So it's not, and web services again they are based on HTTP. Okay. But web services is something which is common across all technologies.
So one can completely forget the RMI and
Go to web.
HTTP or web services.
Use web services.
Okay, so one can completely forget the RMI part from Java.
Completely forget means okay. Yeah. You may develop things which are not based on RMI.
RMI, that is
Yeah.
what
Okay. Fine. But RMI is that object-oriented thinking.
yes.
It's purely object-oriented. Even web services, to some extent, is a similar thing. Fine. Okay. Fine. So let's proceed by looking at what is this HTTP protocol about. Fine. Okay. So what is this HTTP protocol? Yeah, it stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. So why that name Hypertext Transfer Protocol? It was initially used for transportation of hypertext. Hypertext HTML, hypertext markup language, right? So yes, most common thing which was used, what the initial usage of HTTP was transportation of HTML. Okay, fine. So we look at it like this. Again, HTTP is a protocol where you have a server side. Fine, you will have some machine where there will be a HTTP server, and you have the most common client for HTTP server. What is the most commonly used client for HTTP server? It's your browser. Fine, you have a browser which is most commonly used as a HTTP client. Fine. So yeah, what do we do with the browser? We give a URL. Fine. Typically something like HTTP :/ some domain name. Fine, I'll say this is some host which you are specifying. Okay, there are certain other optional things also. Fine, okay, let me put it later. And you might put a optionally, you might also be specifying colon and a port number. Okay, fine, and then you say slash. Then what's the next part? There is some path slash there is some file. Fine, you ultimately may have a path and then ending with a file .html or anything. Fine, and then you may still have hash and something, a reference, or sometimes you might have question mark and this kind of things. Okay, fine. Okay, let's put other things. Let's see what all things are possible in your URL, typical URL. Okay, let me put the things again. So you might be saying HTTP://. Okay, a few things even before I put the host. There's something possible there also. Even before the host. Anyone aware or anything can be put before specifying the host? Huh? Okay. Okay. It's your
local host is also a host. Right?
Yeah, that's also a host. But before you put the host name in the URL, there's something more permitted there. No. That's part of the host name.
I thought local is the answer.
Huh?
Is that host के आगे local is?
नहीं. We can specify username at host. You actually, what it even permits is you can put your username :password also. Fine. This is again optional part. And the whole thing is optional. The whole thing is optional. You may only give username or username : password. But if you say username, then you must specify at. Okay, and then you give your host.
Okay. So अगर हमें फेसबुक में लॉगिन करना है तो मैं यूजर नेम और पासवर्ड बाद में @facebook.com लिखूंगा तो डायरेक्ट लॉगिन हो जाएगा.
It depends whether Facebook server uses this information or not.
Okay.
But this is something, yes, which your browser should be. It's like it's the browser telling the server there in its first interaction itself that this is what I am. Fine, you can try that. So if some server understands, yes, if they had, fine, some servers may be able to understand that.
तो अगर हम ये लिखेंगे तो ये जाके सर्वर को बोलेगा मुझे ये इंफॉर्मेशन चाहिए अगर अवेलेबल है.
See, we have as part of HTTP protocol this information also being sent across to the server. It's up to the server how it uses it.
उसकी मर्जी की बात है.
And look at it. This is client. Client is giving information. There's a lot of information in your browser also, which is also being sent. Fine. Okay. Host, then optional part, :, and a port number.
8083 or something like that.
and we have colon and port number 8080 maybe. Then we put a slash and then we have a path. Fine. Optional part maybe you end your part, fine, path with a slash, or you may have a, yeah, if you look at this part, fine, it's this rest of the things, fine. These are the things. So what are all these things? This is your user info and this is user info. This is, fine, both of this is host, this is port, fine, this is path or file, this is your file, path to the whole file, and this one, this is reference, this is query string, this is a query string. When the various things which you can have in a URL.
So sir, ये ऊपर RL URL पे जो क्लास में नंबर है वो query string है.
Question mark, and when it is question mark, the format is question mark, some name equal to a value for that name, and another name and a value for that other name. That way, any number of values you are providing by giving a name. This name has this value. That name we call it as a parameter name. So you have parameters and a value for each parameter. And it's always possible, fine, same parameter name may appear again. So single parameter may have multiple values also. Fine, it's like same parameter receiving multiple values, that's being allowed. Okay.
Sir,
Mhm.
URL written on the site heads.com/start+/number is just a path.
Yeah.
It's not a query tag.
Okay, so let's see, when we do this, when we enter this into a browser, fine, when we make entry of a URL in a browser, fine, maybe we keep it simple for our example, okay. So, okay, this is just to show what all things are possible in a URL, okay, fine, because yes, as far as Java is concerned, in Java you do have a class called URL, and the URL class, the object of the URL, constructor takes a string as a parameter, and when you create a URL object using a string, okay, you can ask for all this, give me the user info, get host, get port, get path, get reference, get query string. These are all methods available to you in the URL class. So URL is nothing but, object of URL is nothing but, it is made up of all this information. Get protocol, that HTTP. Fine, get protocol. So what's a protocol? HTTP. So URL has a protocol. Fine, that first thing was protocol, HTTP colon, right? So protocol and then other things. Fine. Same way, we used a URL for RMI also. RMI colon / how the lookup was done? That's a URL again. And the protocol RMI. And when lookup has to be done for a remote object. Okay, so URL are those formats, fine. Protocol colon, you can have user information, fine, /host, colon and a port number optional, / some path may be there, some information basically. Okay, anyway, so now, fine. So this is one aspect, okay, URL has, so that's about what URL has. But let's look at it from the point of view of what exactly happens in case of HTTP. You have a server and this is the browser. What is the communication which goes from server to the browser? Fine. There is what is being done here? The host and port, host plus port combination is used for making a connection to the server. A socket connection requires host and port. So it's opening up a socket connection. Okay, oh, there's a process on that machine. Host identifies a machine. On that machine, on this port, some process is listening. I need to make a connection there. That's what the browser is doing. Fine, it has taken, you have given the input. You have given input as this is the host, this is the port. That input used for making connection. But on this connection, it has to send information. There is some communication which will be sent on this. So now the client is going to send a request. The browser is sending a request. So what is the format of that request? How does it send the request? Okay, so the request here will be, fine, what is the request which is sent? You have given URL, part of the URL, so now it is picking up things from the URL. Now the request which is sent is nothing but it has a specific format in case of a HTTP protocol. If the protocol is HTTP, okay, then we have a HTTP request. Okay, let's think of what is the HTTP request looking like. Okay, fine. Okay, so what will happen exactly is there will be a HTTP request going to the server. Server receives the HTTP request, it's able to interpret the information which is received in the HTTP request, take some action locally and give back a response. So the client, basically client's job is to send a request and get back a response. Okay, what goes in the request? What goes in the request? Okay, in this HTTP request, what will be going is something which typically looks like, okay, they have something, there's a first line of your HTTP request. You have the first line of your HTTP request which looks like, it says, so I'll write a general format for this. It says there is something called HTTP method. So there will be a method, okay, space, and then there will be some resource which I want. See, URL identifies a resource, or rather than resource, let me just mention this as the path. Okay, there's a path, and then there is protocol version. Okay, typically, okay, the typical thing which you will now have is something like saying get, that's a method. Path is your slash, after the host :port slash, that part is your path. So here you have the path or the file, path/file. Yeah, you can even have the path/file. That's here. And then which protocol version I'm using? Oh, I'm going to be following HTTP/1.1. Okay, so fine. The first line in your HTTP request. So any HTTP request is having a first line as a method, then the resource. Fine, that path is identifying some resource there. Okay, and then the protocol version. Fine. Okay, and then the next few lines. So in HTTP request, we have a request line. Let me call this as a request line. So this is my request line. It is then followed by multiple headers. There are request headers. Okay, fine. So in these request headers, there's a lot of information being sent. Some information relates to what is the capability of the browser itself, this client, some information about the client. Let the server know about some capabilities. I'm not capable of handling images. It's a text browser. Don't send me images. Fine. I can accept. So I'll say, oh, I accept. So there's something called accept : so that's a header name. We call it as a header. Accept is a header name, and there'll be some value saying, oh, I accept text/HTML, I can text, I can accept this, I can accept this. So accept, I accept this. So this kind of information will say, okay, I can accept this kind of things.
So every request carries these headers
Yes,
every time.
every time.
It is not like that the browser with some identification is registered there.
No. No. HTTP, that's why we say HTTP is a stateless protocol.
Okay. Once.
Fine. HTTP is a stateless protocol. Each request is independent.
सर कई बार अगर हम कोई URL लिखते हैं जैसे कि www डॉट कोई डोमेन नेम डॉट और जैसे ही एंटर करते हैं तो पीछे एडिशनल पार्ट अपने आप आ जाता है तो वो क्या होता है
नहीं, अपने आप नहीं आ रहा है. I'll explain. There's something more. There's something which we call as redirection. Okay, that's again because of certain things, which is a part of the response. We'll have to look at the response. You have entered your request. A request has gone. Fine, and then in return of the request, there is a response which comes, and based on the response, the browser is also taking another action. That's the other case. Okay, it's.
सो सर जो एचटीटीपी प्रोटोकॉल है उसमें वो इंफॉर्मेशन सिक्योरिटी के प्रोटोकॉल्स भी रहते हैं जैसे कि वो सब इंफॉर्मेशन
HTTPS है तो the additional information will be there. Fine. See, that's what I'm saying. You have one request saying, oh, I'm interested in that particular file. That's what you have said. But it's not only that saying, okay, this is not the only line which goes. It has certain information. Oh, this is so and so browser. It will say agent or user agent. I'm not sure what else. I think it is user agent. Colon, and oh, this is Internet Explorer so and so, or this is Firefox so and so, Mozilla Firefox and everything.
सो सर अगर
It's going to tell, it's going to let the server know about the client, so that server can have, if required, it can use that information to give appropriate response according to the client. It is client's capabilities, letting the server know its capabilities.
तो सर अगर एचटीटीपी देना है या एचटीटीपी सिक्योर देना है वो डेवलपर पर होता है कि कौन सा देना है प्रोटोकॉल अपने आप होता है
नहीं, you can write HTTPS on top. When you write your URL, you can do that.
एडिशनल प्रोग्रामिंग नहीं करना पड़ेगा जो प्रोग्रामर्स होते हैं ये एचटीटीपी
नहीं. Normally, no, nothing is needed. Fine. Fine. And this is not only about programmer, right? This is about protocol between client and server. Okay. Fine. So you could be using this protocol. Fine. Let me just quickly demonstrate this. Okay. Fine. Just a quick thing. Fine. To just give you an idea, yes, that there is something called HTTP protocol, and that, yeah, the first line what we have seen, plus there is actually, depending on the type of protocol, we have another one called host colon space, and you specify the server to whom you have connected. That host can be specified here. Okay, fine. And that's something which is needed in HTTP 1.1 onwards. 1.0 didn't have that header, but we have a number of headers. Headers have their meanings. Fine, headers have their meanings. So version 1.0 of HTTP had a certain set of headers which could be used in request, which would then be interpreted by the server. 2 HTTP 2, yeah, 2. Fine, let me quickly just show a Just give you a feel of this, right? Okay. Okay, let me put this there. So, I'm using Telnet, connect to which one? Some simple server, not Google kind of things, because they do a lot of redirections. Maybe simple host. Huh?
Website का नाम
Huh?
www.university.us.
Redirection नहीं हो रहा है ना normally. And let's make this connection. Okay, and then it says, let's send. Okay, we have to say get slash. There will be index.html. Fine. Okay, and then I'm just putting the header host colon space, and there's a minimum thing which is needed. Yeah. Okay, fine. There's just like this is what we have sent here is the request, and fine. This is what has come as a response to it.
Sir,
It didn't find index.html. That's the only thing. That's fine. But fine, we just wanted to get a feel that yes, there is something.
something that is
Fine, this is what exactly is happening, right? A request is given with
index.html.
this.
File path. File name.
Yes. See, you might even be able to see it here.
Yes. 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 Same response.
Okay. And there's nothing different. Yeah.
Server तो चालू है पर ये index page नहीं.
It's not, it would be index.jsp or index.some ASP or index.php. Fine. It would be some other index. Fine. See, see, if you leave it blank,
Instead of this,
just leave it blank, then by default,
CGI.
server would do something.
CGI.
ये क्या है? ये सब क्यों दे रहा है?
नहीं देना चाहिए.
ऐसा ये सब क्यों दे रहा है? ये सब सारा टेक्स्ट फाइल क्यों दे रहा है?
मैं यूज कर रहा हूँ और कुछ यूज.
अच्छा, तुम ही कर रहे हो ना?
हाँ, मैं उसके ऊपर कोई किसी को पता ही नहीं होगी hosting.
पर कोई भी ऐसा डाल के मालूम कर लेता है.
लेकिन इसमें मिलेगा क्या?
जो भी रखा होगा वो तो दिख रहा है ना.
नहीं रखा है, वो अपने आप जो सर्वर उनको जो बना होगा वही.
ओके है ना?
क्लिक करो ना सर टेक्स्ट पे.
हम्म.
ये इसकी चीज है. 10 साल से तो इसकी नहीं है. 12 साल से.
हाँ? दूसरा भी सेम है, देखना है.
हाँ, देख सकते हैं इसमें क्या है. इसकी कोई चीज है.
हाँ, इट्स द सेम ना. Anyway, and it could have been a full path. Okay, fine. The idea is clear. What's happening? नहीं.
There can be /c kernel, there can be /.
Okay, fine. Actually, what we have seen through this is actually because we are sending request. And what we have seen through this is the response part, how the response is coming. Fine. Again, we'll be discussing response later. Fine, what is this response thing? Okay. Take care. Fine, but it gives an idea that yes, such is the way of sending the response. So request is sent with method. First line is a request line. Fine, and then there are a number of header lines. In our case, we use only one header in that example, host. We put one header called host. Okay, so same way there are a number of headers and they have different purposes. Fine, you use different headers. Fine, for example, I said user agent, that's another header. It may be agent or user agent. Fine, you can look at it later. Fine, we'll see there are ways, because this is what we are doing is client side. Fine, you'll be able to see different headers. Once we come to the server side, then we should be able to see the request headers which come to the server. The coding which we are doing currently, we are not even written a code for this, but what we are doing currently is client side. And if you do something on server side, then we should be able to see how exactly the request is coming. Fine. Okay, so there are things like host. Okay, it's the purpose of those headers. Send one purpose, send information about the
agent.
capabilities of the browser. Fine, I am so and so agent. Fine, I accept these things. Fine, I don't accept this. I can accept encoding. Accept encoding. It says accept encoding, and then it will say gzip. Gzip encoded. Fine. So yes, you can send compressed information to me. It will be okay with me, and I am capable of accepting compressed responses. So response can be compressed instead of sending the whole thing, and it can do a compression. The server can do a compression and send the response to the client. So client is saying, okay, you can send with this kind of encoding. Fine. Other things about client. Now there are one thing was rightly pointed out that yes, we have HTTP being a stateless protocol. Fine. Now, in spite of being stateless, you still can manage at the application layer some kind of a state. For that, what you will need to do? Fine. One option is, you may have heard of this. This is something called cookies. What is a cookie?
It's about the information of that. It's a client.
Where is this cookie? Where are cookies managed? On the client. Fine. Cookies are managed on the client. They are, what are they? What is a cookie? It's some, it's managed on a client. But who manages it on the client?
Server.
It's a server. Fine. It's nothing but server asking the client to remember this. Fine. See, when you form a URL, you give a URL. The first thing the browser or the client is supposed to do is it has to formulate its request. When it is formulating the request which I'll be sending across, okay, there will one stage where it'll say, okay, I have to set up the headers which I'll be sending. So agent, and there are a few things which may be fixed. Okay, user agent, it's always going to be fixed. But then it is also, then it is saying, okay, oh, I'm connecting to this URL. For this URL, are there any cookies with me? It is managing a database of cookies. And when I say database, don't think in terms of, okay, it will be some RDBMS or anything. It can be in a file or something. Fine. The question is, the point is, it is managing cookies server wise, URL wise. For this URL, these are the cookies which I have got. This is for this servers, I have these cookies. So server wise, URL wise, cookies are managed on the client browser itself. So whenever it is sending a request, it sees, okay, I am sending request to so and so place. For this, do I have a cookie? The cookies are set by the server. When they give a response, they are asking the client that you can store this. You can store this information. But when you store this information, you remember it has come from me. Fine. Okay? So it is on the client side, cookies are managed URL wise, server wise. So when the request is being sent, yes, there is some header called cookie. Fine. And here, by separating with semicolon, there will be some delimiter by which multiple cookies are sent. Cookies are key value pairs. There is a cookie name and a value for the cookie. When cookies also have their life, they will be expiring in so much time. Fine. Client won't just keep on remembering everything for all the time. Okay. All the cookies which have been set by the server. Okay. Fine. So cookie is another thing. Other thing was, oh, we have put that username colon password thing, right? So even for that, there will be a header. There is some header, I don't remember the exact header name, but it is authentication related things. And there's some header by which the information about the user is being made available to the server. Okay, so that user information is not in that request line, it's in the header. Okay, fine, it's the identity of the user. Basically, the user's identity is being sent. Fine. Okay, then fine. So idea is clear. So the format of a HTTP request is a request line followed by a number of header lines, and these are all in ASCII, purely ASCII. And then once all your headers are over, there is one blank line. A blank line indicates headers are over. There are no more headers. A blank line indicates end of headers. Now certain methods, this is the method, the example which we took here, the HTTP method was get. We do have certain methods using, there are other methods. For example, there is also a method called post. Fine, get, post. There are other methods, put, delete, trace. Fine. So there are a number of things which can be used as method, that first request line. If that method is post, in that case, it is also sending content. I said it's exchange, it's not about receiving, it's an exchange. Client is also able to post information to the server. Not information, because information goes as headers, but is able to post content. I'll use the term content. So if you are sending content, and if there is content also to be sent, that is after the header line. But in such a case, think of more headers. If the client is going to be sending some content, so if it's a post, it would have more headers here, because the headers will be used for giving information even about the content. It will say, the content type is so and so. What I am sending, the type of content colon, and there's the information about the type of content. Fine. You attach a file and send it.
Can we send PDF, HTML? What?
That's because it is having a post request. Fine. The content would be that part, right? Your file content. But then there will be headers. In the headers part, there will be headers to describe
What is the
the content, information about the content. The content type is this. There's a content length. If it's a text content, it will say, I'm using the which character set, what is the character set being used. Right? Content type, when we say content type, what is it? It's what we call as the MIME type. And it is always having format something slash something. So for example, we'll say text slash XML or text slash HTML or text slash plain. Fine. It is even something like multi-part slash form data. Multi-part form data is also there, right? Which is used while sending a request. So request can have content also. Fine. So format is simple. Request line, number of headers, a blank line to indicate end of headers, and if it requires content, it will be after the blank line. Fine. So that's your HTTP request. Fine. Now we can start looking at the response. Okay. So let's look at the HTTP response. Find what's there in the HTTP response. A HTTP response looks like this. It again has very similar structure. Okay. We can think of the first line as a response line. Okay, first line is a response line. Then it has a number of headers. There will be a blank line, and then there will be the content. And it is about exchange of content. HTTP is about exchange of content. Fine, different type of content can be there. Fine, let's see this. What's a response line looking like? Fine. A response line, a typical response line would be having protocol version. The first thing is protocol version. Okay. Then after protocol version, there is a status, or you can call it as a response code, status code. Okay, this is a 3-digit code, 3-digit, and then there is some message. When this message is associated with the status code, according to the status, a message would be there. Fine. Okay, for example, you had seen one example already. 404 was the status code. But before that, what did it say? Oh, it said HTTP/1.1. Status code was 404. Here it says, oh, if it is 404, the message would be file not found. Yeah, we have different kinds of response codes and they have their meanings. And so for the browser is receiving these responses. Fine, let's see what these responses look like. And then one more thing, there will be headers after this. Fine, if you go back, fine, you can just quickly look at this. Yeah, what did we get? HTTP/1.1, we got 404, it says not found. It said not found, that's a message for 404. Okay, and then it says header, one of the headers, oh, that's a date, so date coming from the server. Okay, this is the date from the server. Server says, okay, like there was an agent there. Fine, here we have server. What's a server? Fine, server gives its information. So it is Apache so and so. Fine, so fine. And then it says, oh, I have some content, because this is going to send content. Whenever there is a content which is sent, it will say the length of the content and the type of the content. Type of content is text/HTML. Now in this, multiple information is included, semicolon, then it is including information, char set equals, and it is giving information of the character set for the content. It's describing what kind of content is there. Information about content is coming in headers. Fine. And then this is a content part. And this is the content part. Okay, this is what you will see in the view source. And view source shows you the content part. Clear? Host port was used for making connection, then sending a request, and we just used only one header. In the request you could have said multiple headers. Okay, and the response, first is protocol version, then 3-digit code. Let's look at what are the values of the 3-digit codes and what they mean. And they are actually ranges, and they have been grouped. These 3-digit codes have been grouped. So let's look at that. So we are looking first at the status code. So if your status code, okay, so if the status code is in the range of 100 to 199, fine, or rather 1XX, fine, 100 to 199. All these are nothing but they are just status code which has a meaning that this is just an information. Okay, this will not be very common. These response codes are not common. Okay, these response codes are also continuation. Okay, they are intermediate responses. Fine, sometimes you may have a very large response. Fine, so it's coming in multiple parts. There is a big content and it may come in multiple parts. In that case, you may be receiving this as an intermediate. Okay, we have the other one, 200 to 299. This range indicates successful. Okay, your request has been successfully processed, and here is the response. Your request has been successfully processed on the server side, and here is your response. Okay, fine. 300 to 399. Okay, this is the category where we call as redirections. There are different ways of redirections. Okay, what is a redirection? Fine. The server wants to indicate that this is not the place, whatever you are asking for from me, fine, this path whichever you have given, for that path you please go and use a different URL. Fine. So what is the different URL? Oh, that information will come as part of a header. For example, there's a header called location. So whenever there is this 3XX, there will be a location colon and the new location where it should be sending the request again. Fine. So when you are talking about, okay, oh, you type something, but there's something else which comes. Fine. This is what's happening. The server is giving us a response which is saying redirection. Fine. You want to be, it wants you to go to a different place, not here. This resource which you are looking is not here. It's at that place. So that place has to be coming as a location. It's fine. There has to be a location header. This will typically contain one of the headers as location. Okay, so 300 to 399, that's your redirections. Okay, moved, temporarily moved, permanently moved, or some such information. So that way there will be different codes for that. Okay, then we have the category 400 to 499. This is request error. Your request has an error. What you are requesting is not something which is valid. What you are requesting, no, you are not authorized to use this. Yeah, it knows your user information, and from the user information it says, oh, you are not authorized for this, or oh, you haven't even authenticated. It requires that you should be authorized, but I don't know who you are. You please get authenticated. Fine. Such headers. Fine. So there are different response codes here. 401, 403, 404. We know, oh, what you keyed in is something wrong. It's not something which is available here. Fine. So this is error in the request. Okay, that's 400 to 499. Then we have the other category, 500 to 599. This is error in the server side. Server error. The idea here is, yes, what you have given, I have syntactically it is all right. I have accepted it. But then when I started processing at my end, something failed at my end. On server side, something has failed, a failure on the server side. Okay, I'm unable to process your request, and I'm sending a response here saying, okay, I'm unable to process this. So there is an error on the server side. That will be indicated by, normally it says 500 server error. Fine, so these are the categories for the response codes. Yeah. Okay, I want to see one example of redirection. Fine, if you know some redirection, maybe if I say google.com, it will go to google.co.in. Fine, let's see the redirection. Okay, let's try that. Okay. And see what exactly is the response here. And we know it normally redirects to co.in. It's taking longer. Normally these two is sufficient. 2 lines in your request are sufficient. Yeah. Let's try someone else. तुरंत देना चाहिए, जो ऐसा कर रहे हैं स्लैश में और कुछ देना है. Let's give one more header then. एजेंट स्पेलिंग मिस्टेक होगी. नहीं, द आइडिया ऑफ हेडर्स, ठीक है, देख लें. वी कुड मैनेज अ रीडायरेक्शन. और वे पे चल रहा होगा, देखिए. The idea I wanted to have was to show you that, try to show that it will get a location header. There will be a header called location in the response. We will see that some other time. Okay. Fine. Yeah, so request is fine. Response also, format is quite similar. Fine. Okay, fine. We have actually seen a response already, how a response comes. Okay, fine. So now the idea of all this is, yes, what we have in Java. Fine. In Java, we got a class called. There are a few classes which are useful here. What we want to understand first is we would like to do what a browser does. Okay, we'd like to make a connection to a server and get a response from it. I know a URL. I want to download any content from the web. I should be able to do it. So we are first going on the client side. And as a client, what I can do. And so for as a client, as a HTTP client, if you want to use anything related to HTTP client, you have a few useful classes in Java. They are part of the java.net. The package is java.net. The classes to be used, you will be using a class called URL. Fine. From a URL, you should be able to manage a class called URL connection. Okay, URL connection is actually an abstract class, has lot of subclasses, and one of such subclasses is HTTP URL connection. Okay, the object of this class will be used for making a connection to a server, and this is client. These are client classes. Fine, they'll help you to make a connection to the server. Okay, before you make a connection to the server, you need to set up your headers. You need to set up the things, your request properly. And that's why we needed to know what is a request, what's there in a request. When you set up your request headers, fine, send a request, get back a response, and then interpret the response. In the response also you will get headers. Fine, in the response you will get content. Then you would like to read the content part. Your main interest would be in the content which comes from the response. Okay, and if you are interested in sending some request, and sending some content in the request, that should also be possible. Okay, you want to send some content in the request, that should be possible here. Okay. Fine. So these are the three useful classes which we should be looking at. रिस्पॉन्स में और क्या आएगा? See, typically what's happening is you first create object of the URL. How do we create object of URL? How can we create object of URL? One constructor I already mentioned, use a string. Fine. So you can pass a string. Fine. That's your URL specification. Or you can also create a URL related to an existing URL. Okay, your specification relative to the, so it's relative to an existing URL. A URL, what is it representing? It's representing on a particular host a resource. Resource is identified by some hierarchical path. Okay, it's not necessarily a physical file there. You are just giving a hierarchical path structure, some kind of a name to a resource. And just think, oh, that's just a logical thing. And need not necessarily be related to a physical directory and a file to be there. Okay, there may not be a physical directory or a path. Yes, it is just some kind of a path giving me some resource. It identifies some resource. What kind of resource it will be? When, for example, in case of RMI, when we said, what did we use? We said /HDFC. That's how we used it. When we'll say, okay, /HDFC, right? That was identifying what? It was identifying the key by which a bank object was registered with the RMI registry. Fine. Fine. You are connecting to a server and saying, okay, I want that resource. So that is nothing but some name. Fine. It's not a file. Okay. It's not, when we say /something, it's not necessarily about a file. It may not be a physical file. It is just some name. Okay, and many times it's about a file also, right? But not necessarily a file. Okay. Fine. Okay, so we have URL. So URL has everything, right? Okay. URL has host, port, user info, host, no, URL doesn't have headers. Fine, it has query string, it has got reference, path. Okay, fine, let's look at the API quickly. For URL, the URL class, and then one of the methods in URL is get connection. or sorry, open connection. I'll just put it one way. How do I get a URL connection object? One second, I'll just come back. Now in URL class, you have one method to give you a return type is URL connection. Okay, and method name is open connection. What does open connection do? I have a URL object. Within the URL there is a host, port, all that information is there. I am saying open connection. It gives me object of URL connection. What do you think open connection is doing? The impression it gives? What's the impression it gives? Huh?
It's allowed to establish the connection with
You mean to say it's making a connection with the server? On that host and port, it's making a connection? It's not. Open connection simply gives you an object of URL connection. It's only giving you an object of URL connection. There is no connection made to the server. At this point, there is no connection made to the server. Okay, when we say open connection, it's not making connection to a server. It's just creating one object of URL connection for me. Here's the object of URL connection, which gets created. A URL connection is huge object
with complete details, host, port, and path.
which we can divide into two parts logically. It has a part having information related to the request. It has a part having information related to the response. URL connection has both the parts, request part and a response part. Such an object is first created and given to me. Fine. In this, of course, in request part, a few things like what is the URL? Fine, because it's created from a URL, what is the URL? That can be known. But then, what is supposed to be done here is, we can set up a request here, we fill this area. So you have methods to set up things in this. In the URL connection, we have methods to set up a proper request. Before a connection can be done, you should have decided what all headers must be there. So it won't make a connection at that time earlier, right? It has to, before it makes a connection, you should have actually set up all the things here. Or if there is some content to be set, what is the method? Do I want get or a post? Or that has to be set up before making a connection. You get a URL connection, it has method so that you can set the method. The HTTP method you want. You can set up the headers. Fine, set up headers, set up the method, so you prepared your request and then you can say, fine, then URL connection has a method called connect. That should connect to the server, and if it connects to the server, what will it get? It will get back the response, and the response will be populated from what comes from the server. Single object, two parts, request related information, response related information. Request is something you should be filling, connecting. When you say connect, the response gets filled up. I got this response. One object having all the same. You have methods to get this. You don't set here. Fine. You set this part, you get this part, response part. Okay, so you'll get all kinds of methods in URL connection. Okay, another thing, since we have a method, for example, here is a method called get status. You have a status in the response. You have a method called get status. Now what happens if someone says get status and you were not even connected? You didn't say connect, but you said get status. What will happen?
Should give null.
It will give you a status. It will make a connection, get the response and give you the answer.
So explicitly we not to say that.
So connect may not be explicitly done. You use any method which asks for information from the response. If it was not already connected, it will make the connection, get the response, fill it up, give you your answer. If I already have it, I'll give it to you straight away. If I was not connected, see, it is maintaining state whether it has been connected or not. If not connected and you use any of those methods which is asking information from the response, I'll make a connection, get the response and give you an answer.
Then what is the need of connect methods? Explicitly.
They have provided explicit connect. Clear? Now what you need to look at are two classes. One is the class called URL connection. There is the subclass called the HTTP URL connection. Because some methods are not available here, for them you will have to go here. But yes, most of the things are in the URL connection. Okay, because we are looking at things which are specific to HTTP. Okay. For example, when I say status code, that's not for all protocols, it's for HTTP protocol, and therefore you will find them in the HTTP URL connection. A method called get status is not in the URL connection, it will be in the HTTP URL connection. And so fine, now look at the API from this angle. Fine. And this is how you look at the URL connection object. Single object with all the things. Okay. Request and response, all information in one place. And then what the exercise which we can try is, we can have some URL, we know some URL, maybe there's a image which you like, and we should write a code which can just download that, because we have methods to read the content part. Fine. To read a content, the content is not directly available, what you will get is a method called get input stream. When you say get input stream, you get some input stream object from where you can read the content part. Here, if you are sending some content, you want to be sending a content, because even sending content is possible, you'll have to use a method called get output stream, which gives you an output stream which allows you to fill the content area in the request. Reading the content, so content part of request and response. So to read the content which is part of the response which has been received, you'll need an input stream. To read to write the content which is to be sent to the server as part of a request, you will get an output stream. Find output stream to fill the request, input stream to read the response. Fine, we'll look at those methods API tomorrow. Fine, we'll continue with that tomorrow. Okay. Fine, so tomorrow we'll do that and we'll try that exercise where we'll download some images or whatever, right? You can have a code which just takes a URL as a parameter and just downloads and creates a file for you locally. Fine? Okay.